They will tell you I walked up to the throne alone and whispered 4 words, and that the Alpha King cleared the entire court before the sound of them had finished leaving my mouth. All of that is true. What they leave out, what no one in that hall could have known, is that I almost did not do it at all. I stood at the back among the unranked for the length of the whole long ceremony, with the words sitting in my mouth like stones. And I told myself, as I had told myself for a week, that it was not my place, that an Omega does not speak to a king, that the safest thing a woman at the bottom can do is stay quiet and stay small and stay alive. Then I thought of the boy, and I crossed the floor. I should tell you who I was before I tell you what I said, because the two cannot be untangled. My name is Sable. I was 24 years old that winter, and I was the lowest thing in the great hall of Stoneholt, an Omega, which in our packs is not a rank so much as the absence of one. Omegas do the work no one names. We carry the water and bank the fires and disappear against the walls so thoroughly that lords will discuss treason a pace from your elbow because they have genuinely forgotten you can hear. I had spent 8 years learning to be furniture. I was very good at it. I want you to understand that being good at it was a choice, and that I had reasons, and that the reasons are the whole story. Because I had a thing I kept hidden, and an Omega with a hidden thing learns to keep very still. I dreamed true. Not always, not on command. I could no more summon it than you can summon a particular dream tonight. But when it came, what I saw in sleep had happened, or was happening, somewhere real. As a child, I had said so out loud, once, to the wrong person, and I had learned what they do to Omegas who claim to see. So I stopped saying it. I banked it down like a fire you do not want the neighbours to smell. I carried the water, and I disappeared against the walls, and I told no one for 8 years what I saw at night. And then I started dreaming of a man in a stone room above the sea. He was thin and grey and patient in the way of people who have stopped expecting the door to open. There was salt on the one high window and a gull on the sill, and a long scar through one eyebrow, and he sat and he waited, and I did not know him from any man in the world. I dreamed him a dozen times across the autumn, and I told myself he was no one, a stranger, a trick of a tired mind. Then the boy showed me the carving. The boy was Finn. He was 6, and he was the most forgotten creature in a hall full of forgotten creatures, and that is saying something when the hall contains me. He was the king's own blood, his brother's son, but his father had died before he could speak in full sentences, and his mother had followed within the year, and a grieving king with a kingdom to hold had not known what to do with a small, silent nephew. So the small, silent nephew had simply slipped lower and lower through the ranks, the way a dropped coin works its way through floorboards until it is gone. Finn did not speak. He had not spoken in years. He lived at the edges, and the kitchens fed him out of habit, and no one met his eyes. And I, being furniture, being safe, being the one creature in Stoneholt who ranked below even him, and so could not lower him by my attention, I had taken to leaving bread where he would find it, and then sitting near where he sat, and then, eventually, letting him fall asleep against my side by the banked kitchen fire, while I mended by the last light. He carried one thing always: a small wolf, carved from pale wood, worn smooth at the ears from years of a child's thumb. And one night, half asleep against me, he turned it over, and I saw, cut small into the underside, a long line through one of its carved brows. A scar. Through the eyebrow. Exactly where the man in my dream wore his. "Who made this?" I asked him, very quietly. And Finn, who did not speak, who had not spoken in years, put his thumb over the carved scar and looked up at me, and his lips moved around a shape with no sound in it. And the shape was a word, and the word was father. I went very cold by that banked fire, because I had been dreaming a dead man. And dead men do not sit waiting by high windows with the salt coming in. I will not pretend I decided cleverly. I lay awake 3 nights doing the arithmetic of my own life. If I said nothing, I stayed furniture, I stayed safe, I stayed alive. If I spoke, an Amiga claiming to see, claiming the king's dead brother breathed, they would call it dark practice on a good day and witchcraft on a bad one. And there is only one ending to that story, for a woman at the bottom. Nobody was asking me to risk it. Nobody would ever know I had not. But the boy put his thumb over a carved scar and shaped the word father with no sound. And I found I could not carry that and stay furniture both. So at the next court, a formal gathering, the hall packed with ranked wolves and visiting lords, the king high on the wolf throne with his face shut like a door, I left the wall. I crossed the open floor while 300 people turned to watch the Amiga forget her place. I went up the dais steps no Amiga climbs. The guards were so astonished that a creature like me would do such a thing that not one of them moved to stop me in time. And I reached the throne, and I leaned to the ear of the most feared man alive, and I whispered 4 words. I will not tell you what they were. Not yet. You are going to hear them the way he did, in the dark, later, when they were the only thing left in the room. For now, you only need what the court saw, which was this. The Alpha King of Stoneholt, who had broken challenges without changing his breathing, who had not shown fear in living memory, went the colour of old ash. His hand closed on the arm of the throne until the wood complained. For one breath he looked not like a king at all, but like a man standing on a floor that has just told him it was never solid. Then he stood, and his voice came out level, even though his face had not caught up to it, and he said, "Out, all of you. The hall is closed." 300 wolves do not question that voice. The hall emptied like water from a cracked jug. Lords, warriors, servants, the lot, spilling out the great doors in a confused tide. And the guards looked to him, and he said, "You as well." And they went, and the doors boomed shut, and then it was only the 2 of us in a hall built to hold 1,000. And the Omega was still standing on the dais where no Omega stands, and the king was looking at me as though I had reached into his chest and closed my hand around the one thing he had spent 6 years pretending was buried. "Say it again," he said, quietly, like a man asking for a wound to be reopened, because he could not believe it had been real the first time. So I said it again, and this time you will hear it. Your brother is alive. For a long moment, he did not move at all. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone rough at the edges, the level court voice cracking down the middle. "Leaf drowned," he said. 6 years ago, in the spring floods, below the eastern falls. We searched the banks for a month. My chancellor recovered, and there he stopped. The way a man stops when a word he has said 1,000 times suddenly tastes wrong in his mouth. We buried what we found. "You buried a story," I said. I had nothing left to lose by then. I had already crossed the floor. "I do not know what is in that grave, sire. I only know what I have seen 6 nights this autumn. A thin grey man in a stone room above the sea, salt on the window, a gull on the sill, and a scar. I touched my own eyebrow. Here. Your nephew carries a wolf his father carved. The carved wolf has the same scar. I did not know whose face I was dreaming until a silent child showed me, 2 nights ago, by the kitchen fire where the 2 of us are kept. I watched the most powerful man in the territory absorb that the brother he had grieved for 6 years might be breathing, and that the proof was being handed to him by the lowest creature in his hall, and that the lowest creature in his hall had also just told him his nephew lived forgotten by a kitchen fire. I have seen men take blows in the training yard. I had never seen anything land the way that landed. "Why?" he said at last. "Why would you risk this? You understand what they call women who claim to see. You understand I could have you taken from this hall tonight, and you would not see morning. Why would an Omega walk up to my throne and put her own neck under the blade for a dead man she has never met?" And here is the thing I had not planned to say, the thing that came out of me unrehearsed in that empty, echoing hall. "Because his son shaped the word father with no sound in his mouth," I said. "And I have been the one sitting beside that boy in the dark for 2 years, and I could not keep this from him, whatever it costs me. He has been grieving a father the whole world told him to forget. If there is any chance the world was wrong, then somebody had to be brave enough to be wrong out loud. It might as well be the one person here with the least to lose." The King of Stoneholt looked at me as if he were seeing me, not the Omega, not the furniture, but the actual woman who had crossed his floor for the first time in his life. And his wolf, I would learn later, had been seeing me for considerably longer than that. But that night, all I knew was that he did not call the guards. He said, "What is your name?" "Sable, sire." "Sable." He said it carefully, like a man setting down something he intended to pick up again. "You will tell no one what you told me. Not the boy, not yet. You have just made yourself the most dangerous person in my kingdom, and you do not even know why." I did not know why, but I was about to find out, and the finding out nearly got me killed. It turned the next morning in the person of the king's chancellor. His name was Osric, and he had served 3 alphas, and he had a face like a closed ledger, all neat columns and nothing showing. He was the man who had organised the search for Leaf 6 years ago. He was the man who had recovered the body. He was the man who, the king told me later, had stood at his shoulder through every black month after, and counselled him gently, always, to let the dead rest, to seal the rooms, to stop walking the east corridor, to grieve and move forward, and never, ever look back toward the eastern falls. I had walked into court and whispered 4 words, and within a day, the Chancellor, who had spent 6 years keeping the king's grief sealed, knew that the seal had cracked. He came to the kitchens himself, which chancellors do not do, and he looked at me the way you look at a sum that has come out wrong, and he smiled. "The Omega who climbed the dais," he said. "There is talk of nothing else. They say you whispered in the king's ear and turned him to ash. They are saying you have a sight, dark gifts in a low creature." He folded his hands. "You should know how these stories end, child. I have seen them end. The kindest version is exile. Shall I tell you the unkind ones?" I said nothing, because furniture says nothing, and I had remembered, too late, how to be furniture. "I am going to do you a great mercy," Osric said. "I am going to confine you to the south cells for your own protection, while the court's passions cool. A few weeks. Quiet. Safe." His ledger face did not change at all. It would be a tragedy if a frightened pack tore apart a poor Omega in the night for witching their king. There was nothing kind in it, and we both knew it. By midday, I was behind a locked door, in the cold, under the hall, cut off from the king, cut off from the boy, cut off from anyone who might believe me. And I understood that I had been neatly removed from the board by a man who smiled while he did it. I sat in the cold, and I thought, he moved fast, faster than fear. A man who only feared the Omega's witchcraft would have waited to see if the talk grew. A man who moved before breakfast was not afraid of my gift. He was afraid of what my gift had seen. I am going to sit with you in that cold cell for a breath before I tell you what I dreamed there, because I would like to ask you something while it is only the two of us. Have you ever known a true thing that nobody wanted to hear, and been shut in the dark for the knowing? Tell me where you are listening from tonight, down in the comments. I read them all in the quiet hours. And if you want to see how a woman locked in a cell with nothing but the back of her own mind turns it into the blade that frees a king, stay close and follow along. What I dreamed behind that locked door changed everything. That was the first crack in the floor under the Chancellor, and I felt it open in the dark of that cell 2 days before the king did. Because here is what I had time to do, locked in the cold with nothing but the back of my own mind. I slept, badly, and I dreamed. And this time I did not dream the stone room. This time I dreamed the night of the floods 6 years gone, and I saw what the carved wolf's owner had seen, and I saw a younger Osric on the wet bank below the eastern falls, and I saw that Leaf had not drowned at all. He had been put in a cart, alive, bound and breathing, with the Chancellor's hand on the rail and the Chancellor's voice telling the driver to go north and keep him quiet and let the king believe the river took him. A king who has lost his only brother to an accident grieves and goes on. A king who still has a brother with a claim, a brother beloved, shares his power. Osric had not wanted a king who shared. Osric had wanted a king hollowed out by grief and leaning on the one steady hand at his shoulder. He had not killed Leaf. A body can be found, a body raises questions. He had done the colder thing. He had stored him. I woke in the cell with my face wet and my hands shaking, and the whole shape of it clear, and no way at all to tell a soul. The king found the way for me. He came down to the south cells himself on the third night, which kings do not do, the way chancellors do not come to kitchens, and Osric did not know he had come. He stood on the wrong side of my locked door in the dark, the most feared man alive, and through the iron grille he said, low, I have walked the east corridor. I have stood at the door I have not opened in 6 years. I went through Leaf's rooms tonight for the first time since we sealed them. A breath. His travelling chest is gone, Sable. The one thing a man takes if he means to be moved a long way. We buried a body the river gave back, and Osric named it Leaf, and I was too broken to look closely, and Leaf's travelling chest is not in his rooms. The grille was cold between us. You did not have a dark gift. You had the truth. And I confined you to a cell on the word of the man who has been lying to me for 6 years. He has not been lying about a death, I said, through the iron. Sire, he has been lying about a life. Leaf is alive because alive he is useful. A grave answers questions. A prisoner answers to whoever holds the key. I told him then what I had dreamed in the cold. The cart, the bound man, the Chancellor's hand on the rail, the road north. I watched it land through the grill, watched 6 years of grief turn in a single moment into something with a far sharper edge. And I learned what an alpha king looks like when grief becomes rage and has somewhere, at last, to go. "Where?" he said. "North, a stone room above the sea. I can find the shape of the coast from the dream, the falls, the gulls, the angle of the light. Give me a map and I will find you the place." I gripped the bars. "But sire, if Osric learns you have walked those rooms, if he learns you believe me, he will not leave a prisoner alive to be found. The mercy he is so fond of will become a different kind of mercy very quickly. We have until he understands that you have stopped grieving and started looking." We did not have that long. The king got me out of the cell that night, over the objection of the guard, with the simple expedient of being the king. He brought me up into the hall, and he did the thing that cost him, the thing I did not ask for and did not expect, the thing that I think the court has not finished talking about even now. He called the council at dawn, Osric among them, ledger-faced, certain, and in front of all of them he set the omega at his right hand, on the dais, where the empty chair had stood for 6 years. And he said, "This woman is under my protection and my hearth. Any hand laid on her is laid on me. Any voice that names her witch answers to me for it." The council went white and silent. Osric's face did its closed ledger nothing, but I was watching his hands, and I saw the knuckles go pale on the table's edge. He had been so careful for 6 years, and the king had just announced, to the one man who most needed not to hear it, that he had stopped believing the Chancellor and started believing the Omega. I knew, in that moment, that Osric would move that night. So did the king. We were ready for the wrong thing. We thought he would run, or burn his papers, or send a rider north to kill the prisoner before the king could reach him. He did send the rider. The king's own second, a broad, quiet man named Bronn, was already on the North Road by dusk, under sealed orders to ride for the coast and find Leaf. And Osric's rider went out the same gate an hour later, meaning to reach him first. That race was real, and it mattered, and I will tell you how it ended. But it was not the thing Osric did that night that nearly finished me. What Osric did was come for the proof, and the proof was me. He understood, you see, that a dream is not evidence. A king may believe his omega, a council needs more. The one thing that could damn Osric before the full pack was the living word of the man he had stored, and the one person who could lead anyone to that man was the woman with the sight. Kill the prisoner in the north, and the grave's lie holds a while longer. But kill the seer in the south, and there is no one left who can even point the way. He was a man of neat columns. He chose the simpler sum. He came to my room past midnight with 2 men and a length of cord, and that same patient smile. And he had chosen his moment well, because the king was in the war room with the council, managing the panic of a court that had just watched its alpha set an omega above his lords. And there was no one in the world who knew Osric had come for me, except Osric. There was one thing he had not counted on. He had not counted on the boy. Finn had been sleeping in the corridor outside my door. He had taken to it since they let me up from the cell. The silent child curled against my threshold like a dog that has finally been allowed back inside. And when Osric's men came down the dark hall, Finn was awake. And Finn understood, in the wordless, certain way of children who live at the edges and learn to read danger before they can read letters, exactly what was happening. And Finn, who had not spoken in years, who had shaped the word father with no sound, opened his mouth in the dark corridor and screamed. He screamed one word, and the word he chose, the first sound to leave that child in 6 years, was my name. It brought the corridor guard. It brought, by terrible good fortune, the king himself, crossing from the war room, close enough to hear a child scream a name into the dark. And it bought me the 4 seconds I needed, because Osric's man had a blade out and meant it for my throat, and a king and a guard were still a corridor away, and the only person in reach of me was a 6-year-old, and I was not going to let a child step in front of a blade meant for me. So I stepped in front of him instead. I want to be precise, because the court tells this wrong too. I did not wait to be saved. I put my body between Finn and the knife, and I took Osric's man's wrist in both hands, and Omega's hands, water carrier's hands, stronger than anyone ever bothers to expect. And I turned the blade wide, and it opened my forearm to the bone instead of finding the boy or my throat. And I held on through it, screaming, while the door burst and the king came through it like the falls themselves coming down. I will spare you the worst of what Magnus did to the man who had drawn steel near that child. I will only say that the man lived because the king needed him to talk, and that Osric did not run because there was nowhere left to run, and that the king held me on the floor of that corridor with my arm bleeding through both our hands and his face finally open, while a 6-year-old who had just spoken for the first time in 6 years sobbed my name over and over into my shoulder, because now that he had found the word, he could not stop. It would have been enough, almost, to end there. But a dream is not evidence, and the council had gathered, woken and frightened, and Osric, bound now but unbroken, ledger-faced even in irons, said the thing he had been saving. An Omega's hysteria and a mad child's noise, he said, to the council, smooth as ever. She has bewitched the king into turning on his oldest servant. Where is your proof, sire? A dream? Bring me the brother you say I stole. Bring me Leaf, living, and I will put my own head on the block. You cannot. Because he drowned, and this creature is a liar, and you are a grieving man who wants too badly to believe her. He was gambling that Bronn would not reach the coast in time, or that Osric's rider would reach it first. He was gambling that the proof was 3 days north and bleeding out or already drowned for real by now. And he very nearly won that gamble, because he was right that we had no proof in that room. Except that I am a seer, and the one thing a seer can do, if she is willing to pay for it, is reach. I had never done it awake. I had never done it on purpose. Everything I had ever seen had come unbidden in sleep, soft, sideways. To reach for it deliberately, in a waking room, with my arm laid open and the council staring, and a man's whole lie hanging on it. That was a different thing entirely. And I knew, the way you know the depth of cold water before you go in, that it would cost me more than I had ever paid. I took the carved wolf from Finn's hands. I closed my cut and bloody fingers around the thing Leaf had made, the smooth wood and the small cut scar, and I reached north along the line of it the way you follow a thread in the dark. And I let the sight take me. It did not come soft. It came like the sea. The cold drove into me until my teeth locked and my breath stopped in my chest. The weight of 6 buried years pressed down until I could not have stood if Magnus had not been holding me up. My nose ran blood and my opened arms screamed and the whole hall went to a roaring grey distance, and I held on. I held the wolf and I held the thread, and I did not let go. Because somewhere on the cold edge of it, there was a thin grey man in a stone room above the sea, and I needed the room to tell me where it stood. And it did. The shape of the coast, the falls to the south of it, the broken tower with the seabird's nest, the name carved by a former keeper into the lintel, which I had never seen and could not have invented, which I spoke aloud into that silent hall with blood on my mouth. Gullspire. "Send to Gullspire," I said, and my voice came out of a very long way off. "The broken tower north of the high falls. He is in the keeper's room under the salt window. Send anyone, send everyone. He is alive tonight, and your Chancellor's rider is on the road to make sure he is not alive tomorrow." Then the cold took the floor out from under me, and I went down into the dark. And the last thing I felt was the king's arms not letting me reach it. I am told I was 3 days getting back. I am told I burned and shook and spoke to people who were not there, and that a silent boy did not leave my side, and that the King of Stoneholt sat by an Omega's bed and held her unbloodied hand, and did not rule his kingdom at all for 3 days, which a king is never supposed to do. I do not remember it. I remember waking on the 4th day to grey morning light and a weight against my side. And the weight was Finn, asleep. And across the room, a thin grey man with a scar through one eyebrow was sitting in a chair by the window, with the salt light on his face, watching his sleeping son, and weeping without any sound at all. Bronn had reached Gullspire first, by 11 hours. The rider Osric sent never came back. The North Road keeps its own counsel. They had broken the keeper's door and found a thin, patient man who had stopped expecting it to open, and they had brought Leif home down the same road his brother had been told carried only his body. Here is the part the court tells right, for once, because 300 wolves saw it. When I was strong enough to stand, the king held a full court, the same hall, the same throne, the same packed ranks who had watched the Omega cross the floor. And he did not seat me at his right hand this time. He came down off the dais. He crossed the open floor himself, all of it, past the lords and the warriors, the way his wolf had apparently been wanting to cross it since the first time it caught my scent by the banked kitchen fire 2 years before. And he stopped in front of the lowest creature in his kingdom, and in front of every wolf who had ever looked through me, he took my unhurt hand and he went to one knee. An alpha king does not kneel. The hall made a sound, like the whole pack inhaling at once. "You walked up to my throne with nothing and gave me back my brother and my nephew and the truth," he said. And he did not lower his voice for any of it. "You took a blade meant for a child. You bled on a council floor to break a lie 6 years old. There is no rank in this pack high enough for what you are, so I will make one. Be my Luna. Not because my wolf chose you, it did, long before I had the sense to, but because I am asking, freely, knowing you owe me nothing. The lowest of all of you," he said to the hall, "is the bravest soul in this kingdom, and I would have her above me to the end of my days, if she will have it. I have spent my whole life knowing the price of things and keeping very still and very small and very safe. I looked at a king on his knee on the cold stone, and at a thin grey brother weeping in the light, and at a boy who had screamed my name back into the world, and I found that staying small was no longer the safest thing, nor the thing I wanted. I will have it, I said. And I will not describe the kiss to you, except to say that something I had banked down and kept hidden for 8 years was finally, in front of everyone, allowed to burn in the open. And that for the first time in my life I did not disappear against any wall, because the whole hall was looking, and I let them. The fallout was real. It always is. A king who kneels to an omega cracks something in the old order that does not close again easily, and there were lords who left the hall stiff-backed, and rivals who took note of a pack whose alpha would upend 1,000 years of rank for one woman's word. Let them note it. Osric was stripped of his name, his columns, and his head. The king gave him a trial, which was more than he gave Leaf, and the trial gave him the wall. The grave below the eastern falls was opened, and the body in it was named at last. A drowned drover from a downstream village whose own family had been told a different lie, and they were brought to Stoneholt and given the truth and a hearth. Because the king had developed, that winter, a powerful intolerance for lies that let a family grieve the wrong thing. It is a year later now, and I am the Luna of Stoneholt, which still makes the older lords swallow wrong, and I find I do not mind their discomfort even a little. Leaf walks the gardens he was stored away from. He is slow to laugh and quick to go quiet, and he and I understand each other. The two people in this hall who know exactly what it is to be kept somewhere small while the world is told you are gone. Finn talks now. He talks constantly. He has 6 years of words saved up, and he intends to spend every one of them. Mostly at me, mostly at meals. And no one has the heart to tell him to lower his voice. Least of all the king, who flinches with pure, helpless joy every single time that child opens his mouth. The east corridor is not sealed anymore. The door at the end of it stands open all the time now, propped with an iron wolf the smith made as a wedding gift. And Leaf's rooms are full of Finn's noise and the salt light. And Magnus walks that corridor every day on purpose. Because for 6 years, he took the long way around it, and he has decided he is done taking the long way around anything. He still cannot ask me a small thing without the asking landing heavier than he means it to. Pass the bread. Will you walk with me? A man who learned, very late and at great cost, that asking is the thing he can give that taking never could. I have learned to hear the weight in it. I always answer freely, with my own mouth. It is, after all, the voice that crossed a floor. So tell me, did you know, before he did, that the danger was never the woman who whispered? Did you catch the Chancellor, or did he catch you, the way he caught a king for 6 years? Tell me down in the comments where you are listening from tonight, and whether you have ever carried a truth you were afraid to say out loud. If this one warmed you, stay close and follow along. There is another waiting, and I promise you, the next woman crosses her own floor. Until then, if you know a true thing, be brave enough to be wrong out loud. You never know who has been waiting 6 years to hear it. I have carried the keys to every door in this fortress for 6 years, which means I know 2 things better than anyone alive: where every lock is, and how little it matters to hold a key when no one will open their ears. I am Tilda. I was 24 that spring, a woman grown by any law you like, and a maid by every law that counted in the king's hall, which is to say I was furniture that walked. I lit the lamps and snuffed them. I aired the rooms no one used. I carried the great ring of iron keys at my hip, and it sang when I walked. And not one person in that fortress had ever once turned at the sound of it to see who was coming. That is the gift of being a maid. You are everywhere, and you are no one, and you hear everything. I heard the plot on a Tuesday, snuffing the lamps in the East Passage. I want to be honest about my choices here, because someone always asks. A maid survives by being unseen. The safe thing the thing 6 years had taught me in my bones was to finish the lamps, go to bed, and let the powerful murder one another the way the powerful do. No one would ever have known I heard. I chose otherwise. I want that on the record. Whatever happened after, It happened because I decided a king's life was worth more than my own comfortable invisibility, and I have never once regretted the decision, only the 7 times I had to make it. 7, I counted. The first time, I told the captain of the night watch, a decent man named Gunnar, with a beard like a thorn bush and no patience for maids. He heard me out, I will give him that, and then he asked me, not unkindly, whether I had been at the cooking wine. The lamps make the passages warm, he said. Sound carries strangely. Go to bed, girl. The second time, I told the steward of the kitchens, who told me to mind my pots. The third, fourth, and 5th times blur together. Because they were the same. A closed door, a busy man, a maid with keys at her hip, and a warning in her mouth, and the small specific humiliation of being thanked for my concern. I have been thanked for my concern more times than I have been paid, and it costs the thanker exactly nothing, which is how you can tell it for what it is. The 6th time I told Lord Roderick, the master of the king's household, because I had run out of lesser men to disbelieve me. Roderick was the calm at the centre of the fortress, the king's own sworn shield since they were boys, keeper of the household, the man who knew where everything was, and who everyone trusted to know it. He had a way of listening that made you feel heard, right up until the moment you realised you had been managed. He listened to my whole account, the 2 voices in the East Passage, the word poison, the word feast, the name I had put to one of them, and then he folded his hands and told me, gently, that he would look into it personally. He did look into it. That was the trouble. I just did not understand yet what looking into it meant, when the man doing the looking was the man you should have been looking at. The 7th time, I told the king, I had no business near him. A maid does not approach the wolf throne. But the wolf made my business for me, and that is where this story actually turns, so let me back up and tell it properly. The king's wolf had been behaving strangely around me for a month before any of this, and I had told no one. Because who would I tell? And what would I say the king's wolf keeps bringing me things? Because it did. It started with a glove. I found one of the king's hunting gloves on my pallet in the maid's quarters, fine grey leather, unmistakably his, and I nearly fainted. Because a maid found with the king's belongings is a maid who hangs. I returned it to the kennels in a panic. 3 days later, the wolf brought it back. To me, it walked the length of the lower corridor with the king's glove in its mouth, past warriors who froze against the walls, and laid it at my feet in the scullery, as though completing a transaction we had agreed upon. Then it was a boot. Then, God help me, it was the king's own seal ring, which I wrapped in a rag and delivered to Gunnar with my heart in my throat, swearing I had not stolen it. And Gunnar looked from the ring to me to the wolf, sitting in the doorway, with its tongue out and its tail sweeping the floor, and he said a word I will not repeat in front of an audience. The king, I would learn, found this development unbearable. Magnus of the Iron Reach did not lose control of anything, least of all his own wolf, and his own wolf was conducting a one-animal courtship of a scullery maid in front of his entire court. He was, by every account, mortified. He was also, and this is the part the court could not forgive, entirely unable to stop it. So when I came to the great hall, on the 7th day, with my warning, the wolf was already there. And the wolf was already mine, and that changed what a maid was allowed to do. I will tell you what the king looked like the first time he truly looked at me, but not yet. The first time he looked at me, he did not see me at all. He saw a maid making a scene, and his face closed like a door I did not have the key to. "My king," I said, and the hall went quiet the way a hall does when something improper is happening. "There is a plot against your life. At the feast. I have heard it spoken, twice, and I have told 6 men, and I am telling you because the 6 men did not listen, and I have run out of men." A laugh went around the hall. Not cruel, exactly. Worse than cruel. Indulgent, Roderick rose from the king's right hand, smooth as oil on water. My king, I have looked into the maid's claim myself. It is a misheard conversation in a warm passage. The household is secure. I would stake my life on it. He smiled at me, and it was a kind smile, and that was the most frightening thing about it. I understand the girl means well. The king looked at Roderick, his oldest friend, his sworn shield, the calm at the centre, and he looked at me, a maid with shaking keys and no rank, and a wolf inexplicably planted at her side. And there was no contest. There was never going to be a contest. I had known that before I opened my mouth, and I had opened it anyway. The household is secure, the king said. To the room. Not to me. There will be no... And his wolf, sitting at my hip, threw back its head and made a sound that was not agreement. That was the 7th time, and it was the last time I asked, because asking had taken me as far as asking goes. The wolf gave me one more chance at him before they did, and the wolf did not ask my permission. I was carrying linen along the upper gallery, keys when it came around the corner at a dead trot, took the hem of my sleeve in its teeth, and towed me linen and all through a door that should have been the king's private study, and was, because the king was in it. Magnus looked up from a map of his own border with the expression of a man whose dignity has just been handed to a maid by a wolf. For a moment, neither of us. The wolf sat down between us, pleased with itself, and refused to move. I did not send for you, he said. No, my lord. He did. I gathered the linen against me, and did not curtsy, because my hands were full, and because I had run out of the part of me that curtsied. I'll go. Stay. It was not a kindness. It was a command, and it cost him to give it. I watched it cost the small war in his jaw, and I understood that the proud king had just discovered he did not want me to leave the room, and was furious about the discovery. So I told the truth, the way I do, because it was the only currency I had left, and I was done spending it carefully. You think you cannot be surprised, I said. That is the whole of you, my lord. Everyone in this fortress knows it. You have made certain they know it. The king who is never caught off guard. The man who sees it coming. It is your armour, and it is very good armour. I set the linen down on the edge of his map, which was an outrage, and I did not care. But a thing everyone knows about you is a thing your enemies know about you. Someone has looked at your armour and found the seam. They are not planning to get past a man who cannot be surprised. They are planning to use the fact that you cannot believe you might be. The fire moved in the grate. He had gone very still, the particular stillness of a man holding a door shut against something. You are a maid, he said. You light lamps. I do. I light every lamp in this fortress, and I snuff every one, and I have been doing it in the dark behind your walls since before you knew my face, which means I have heard 6 years of things men say when they think only the furniture is listening. I met his eyes, which a maid does not do. I am the last person in your kingdom who would lie to you, my lord, because I am the only one who gains nothing by it. I have already lost. They have my warning, and they have laughed at it. The only thing I have left to give you is the truth, and you will not take it, and I cannot make you, and I find that my voice did the thing I had not given it permission to do. I stopped it. I find I cannot watch it. That is all. He stood. He came around the table, and the wolf let him, and he stopped a full pace from me, a careful man. A guarded distance. A king who held the space between us like something he did not trust himself to close. He looked down at me for a long moment. When I was 19, he said, slowly, as though the words were being drawn out of a place that had grown over, a man I trusted told me there was no danger on the Eastern Road. I believed him. because I was certain of him, the way you are certain of the people you love. My father took that road. He stopped. His hand had risen, halfway, as if to offer something, and then it fell, and did not. I have spent every year since making certain I would never again be the fool who did not see it coming. I built a man no one could surprise. Something terrible moved behind his face. And you have just told me that the man I built is the door they intend to walk through. Yes, I said. Quiet, I have. For one moment, I thought he would believe me. I saw it cross him, the willingness, the crack. I have replayed that moment more than any other, because if he had taken my hand then, in that room, it would all have gone differently and easier, and I would have a whole shoulder. He did not take my hand. He closed the door instead, not the real one, the one in his face, the one I did not have the key to. Pride is a fortress too, and his had stood 20 years, and a maid does not breach in an afternoon what grief built in a lifetime. The household is secure, he said again. To me, this time. Softer, which was worse. I picked up my linen. The wolf rose to follow me, and he did not call it back, and we left the King of the Iron Reach alone with his map, and his certainty, and the seam I had shown him, and he would not look at. That was the closest he came to seeing me, before the dark. A pace away, his hand half risen, the truth on the table beside his border. I want it remembered, because of what he became after, that he had the chance to be it sooner, in the light, and could not. The dark made him brave. I have decided to forgive the dark for that, since it gave me the rest of him. They took my keys the next morning. Roderick ordered it for my own protection, the order said, so that I would not wander where I should not, and frighten myself with shadows. A maid without keys is a maid without work, and a maid without work is a maid one short step from the gate. I understood the message. I had become inconvenient, and inconvenient things in a fortress get moved to the edge, and then out of it. I did not go quietly, but I went. There is a difference between a woman who accepts a thing and a woman who is biding. I was biding. I gave up the ring of iron that had sung at my hip for 6 years, and I felt naked without it, and I started, that very afternoon, to make myself a problem in the only way left to a maid stripped of her keys. I started watching Roderick. It is a strange power. Being no one, stripped of my keys, I was less than furniture. And less than furniture is invisible in a way even maids are not. I followed the master of the household through his ordinary day, 3 paces behind a serving cart that was not mine, and I learned the thing that should have been obvious from the first night. The thing that had been standing in the calm centre of every dismissal. He was there, every time. When Gunnar laughed at me, Roderick had been within earshot, examining a ledger. When the kitchen steward told me to mind my pots, Roderick had been in the doorway, waiting on the king's supper. Every single time a man had told me I was mistaken, the master of the household had been close enough to hear it land. Close enough to make sure it landed. He had not been investigating my warning. He had been conducting the disbelief, the way a man conducts a choir, standing where he could hear every voice and correct any that went off the note. If you have ever known a thing in your body before your mind could prove it, known it the way you know a stair is there in the dark, then you know how I felt. 3 paces behind that cart, with no keys, and no rank, and no one who would believe the maid who had been wrong about everything except the one thing that mattered. Stay with me. We are nearly to the dark part, and the dark part is where a maid finally gets to be the only one who can see. If a slow-burning story about being right when no one believes you is the kind of thing you stay up for, you might subscribe before the lights go out they are about to. Now, back to it. The wolf found me that night. I was in the disused West Tower where they had quartered me, keyless, useless, and it came up the stairs and put its great head in my lap, and would not leave, and I understood that the king's wolf had decided to spend the night guarding a maid instead of the king, which meant the king was unguarded by the one creature in the fortress that could not be lied to. I should explain what I had finally pieced together, because I had pieced it together by then, sitting in a cold tower with a wolf's head in my lap. The name I had heard in the passage, the name I had carried to 6 men Vaughan, a loud rival lord who had been sniffing around the king's borders for a season. That name was a gift. Vaughan was the obvious one. Vaughan was meant to be heard. A maid who accused Lord Vaughan could be dismissed as a maid who had heard tavern gossip and gotten above herself. Roderick had let me run at Vaughan like a hound at a dragged scent. Because every hour I spent being wrong about Vaughan was an hour no one spent being right about Roderick. The plot was not Vaughan's. The plot belonged to the calm man at the king's right hand, the only man with keys to every door, including the ones I had been forbidden, and the feast was tonight. I did not have my keys, but I had carried them for 6 years, and I will tell you a secret about keys. The woman who holds them stops needing them. I knew which doors stuck. I knew which servants' passages ran behind which walls. I knew the fortress in the dark, the way Roderick knew it in the light. And I knew one thing he had forgotten. Because powerful men forget the people who clean up after them, I knew that every torch and lamp and candle in the great hall was lit and snuffed by maids, on a signal from the passages behind the walls. Which meant if you wanted the hall dark at a chosen moment, you did not need sorcery. You needed the maids. You needed someone who could give the maids the signal. You needed the master of the household. I went down through the walls. The feast was loud above me, the whole pack at the long tables, the king at the head with Roderick at his right and Gunnar at his shoulder, and not one of them looking for a maid in the dark behind the stone. I moved through the servants' passages I had cleaned 10,000 times, and I found the lamp boy at his post by the signal cord, a child of 9 who knew me, and I crouched in the dark and I asked him, quiet, who had told him tonight's signal. The master himself, the boy said. Strange, he said. The master never comes down here. I told the boy to run. I told him to find Gunnar and say the words wolf and dark and Tilda was right, and to keep saying them until someone's hand closed on a sword. He was a good boy. He ran. And then, above me, the signal came not from the boy's cord which I was holding, but from a second cord I had not known about, because Roderick had set his own, because of course he had. The man left nothing to a maid he could do himself. The lights went out. I have tried many times to describe what a great hall sounds like when the light dies and 300 wolves cannot see. It is not screaming, not at first. It is a held breath, 300 strong, and then the scrape of benches, and then the first blade, and under all of it a single voice Roderick's. Calm, even now. Calm, always saying the king's name like an apology. I came up out of the wall into the black, behind the wolf throne, and I did the only thing 6 years and no keys had left me able to do. I found the king in the dark. I found him by the cold spot in the hall that was him. By the place the air went still the way it does around a man who has just understood that his oldest friend is moving toward him with a knife. I got my hand around his wrist. I will not tell you I was brave. I was past brave. I was only sure, and I pulled. Hard, a maid hauling a king sideways off his own throne. And the blade that had been meant for his heart went into my shoulder instead. I felt it the way you feel cold water, all wrongness and no pain yet, and then all pain. I did not let go of his wrist. I had hauled heavier things through these passages. I hauled him. Door, I said, into the dark, into his ear, the only word that mattered. Behind the throne. Trust the maid or die, my king, choose now. He chose. I have thought about that, since that a man whose entire life was built on never being unguarded, never being led, never trusting a thing he had not verified twice, chose in the black to be led by the hand by a bleeding maid he had dismissed in front of his whole court. He chose me in the one moment he could not see me, which is the only moment that has ever counted to me. I took him through the wall. I knew every turn. He did not. I bled down the back of my own arm and counted the passages by the feel of the stone and got us to the lower stair, and behind us I heard Roderick's men finding the empty throne and the smear of my blood and not understanding. Because they were warriors, and they were thinking like warriors, and the one thing a warrior cannot track is a maid who has walked away through a wall that isn't supposed to be a door. We came out into torchlight in the lower yard, into Gunnar and a dozen swords, and the lamp boy white as milk. And Gunnar took one look at the king alive, and the maid bleeding, and his face did a thing I will carry to my grave. Because it was the face of a man understanding, all at once, every single time he had laughed. The king held me up. I was past holding myself up by then, and he turned to Gunnar with his arm around a maid, and her blood on his royal hand, and his voice not calm at all, for once in his armoured life not calm. "The hall," he said. "Roderick, now, and someone get this woman a healer before I lose the only person in my kingdom who saw." It was not clean after that, the way these things are never clean. They took Roderick in the dark hall, and he did not fight, because his weapon had never been a sword, it had been everyone's trust, and that was spent. By the law of the pack, he could have demanded a challenge. He did not. He demanded, instead, to speak, and the king let him, which I did not understand until I heard what he said. "You never listened to her," Roderick told the hall, almost gentle, the last cruelty of a cruel and gentle man. "Not one of you. I only had to stand beside you while you didn't." He looked at the king then, his oldest friend, and there was something in it that was almost grief. "You taught them all that you could not be surprised. I just used the lesson. That was the thing that broke the king's face. Finally, not the knife, not the betrayal. That, the master of the household had built the whole murder out of the king's own pride, brick by brick, and called it a lesson, and he was right, and everyone heard him be right. Magnus stripped him of name and household, and put him past the eastern border, which is the law's coldest mercy. Vaughan, who had been nothing but a dragged scent the whole time, was sent home with apologies he did not deserve, and will dine on for years. The fortress did not heal quickly. A household that has learned its own trust was a weapon does not simply pick up its baskets and carry on. There were quiet weeks. There were a great many maids who suddenly found that men turned, now, at the sound of keys. My shoulder healed slowly and badly and aches when the rain comes, and I have decided to keep the ache, the way I keep everything, as a record. Here is the part I said I would tell you. The first time the king truly looked at me. It was 3 days after, in the healer's quarters, where I had been told to stay, and had mostly ignored the telling. He came alone, which a king does not do, and he stood in the doorway. He is a tall man, and the door was small, and the wolf was already inside, asleep across my feet like it owned them, which it did, and he looked at me as though he had never seen me before in his life. Because he had not. He had seen a maid making a scene. He had seen furniture that walked. Now he saw the woman who had hauled him through a wall in the dark with a knife in her shoulder, because she was sure. And he did not have a single word ready, the famously controlled king of the Iron Reach. Not one. And I watched him not have it. "You told them 7 times, he said at last. 8, counting you. I am aware of which one I was." His jaw moved. "I dismissed you in front of my court. I let him take your keys. I would be dead, and so would half that hall, if you had been the woman I treated you as." He stopped, started again, and this is the only soft thing I will give you, because it is the only one that matters. My wolf knew you for a month. He brought you my glove, my seal, my own hand if he could have managed it, and I told myself it was an animal making an animal's mistake. Because the alternative was that the unguarded thing in me had already chosen, and I had not been asked. He looked at the wolf, asleep on my feet. I am the most well-defended man alive, and I have been outmaneuvered by my own heart and a scullery maid, and I find I do not mind losing for the first time in my life. I told him he was not as armoured as he thought he was. He said he was beginning to understand that, and then he closed the small distance there was to close, and he kissed me once, careful of the shoulder, and I understood in that single moment that being seen, truly seen, by someone who had every reason not to bother is a thing worth getting stabbed for, though I would recommend against the stabbing if there is any other way. There usually is, there just wasn't for me. 6 months on now, and the rain still finds my shoulder, and I still hear keys differently than other people do. I am Luna of the Iron Reach, which is a sentence I write down sometimes just to look at it. The court has stopped flinching when the wolf follows me, because the wolf follows me everywhere, and the court has more sense now than to argue with what the wolf decided before any of them could see it. Gunnar guards the king's door himself and turns, every time, at the sound of me coming, and once called me Luna to a junior warrior in a tone that dared the boy to laugh. The boy did not laugh. No one laughs anymore. It is not fear. It is that they finally heard the keys. Magnus is a proud man, still you do not unbuild a fortress in a season, but he is a proud man who now asks the maids what they have heard, which has saved his border twice already. Because maids hear everything, and always have, and the only thing that ever changed is that someone finally turned around. He gave me a key. Last month, on a plain morning, with no ceremony, the way the realest things are given. Not a ring of them won. Iron, old, worn smooth. The key to the one room in the fortress that no maid has ever held the key to. The room behind the wolf throne. The dark passage I hauled him through. Sealed now, kept, ours. He put it in my healed and aching hand and folded my fingers over it and did not explain. Because he did not need to. I know what a key means better than anyone alive. It means someone, finally, has opened the door. So tell me, did you believe her? Did you believe me? When no one in that hall would, or did you wait for the lights to go out like the rest of them? Come down to the comments and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read them all now. Every one, because I spent 6 years being no one, and I have developed strong opinions about being heard. If a story about a woman who was right all along is the kind you stay for, subscribe and stay close. There is always another door here, and always someone who knows where the dark passages run. Until the next one. Mind the lamps.